It's that time again. It's Baggy Hi-Fi time. Greetings cats and kittens, and welcome to another episode of Baggy Hi-Fi, a YouTube channel devoted to record collecting and the vinyl community here in the UK. I hope you're all keeping well as you can be under the current circumstances. This new video, number 16 in the series, is a response to a thread which has been begun by Chris Propfe at Musically Obsessed. It's his vinyl community channel, and the theme is a very simple one, but one which a few people have already responded to, and it's one that I couldn't resist really, and it's one I tried not to take too long in thinking about. I wanted to make it more spontaneous, so I only spent about 5 minutes looking on the shelves for records that featured instrumentals. Some of these instrumentals are by bands who wouldn't normally do instrumentals, and others are groups who were entirely instrumental. Now, this first one I'm going to show is probably the most well-known, at least the most well-known group out of these 5 records, and it's Roxy Music from one of their later LPs from 1982, Avalon. Now, people seem quite divided on Roxy Music. They either seem to like the early sort of experimental pop art school sounds of the earlier stuff, especially with Eno, and those people aren't usually very keen on the later, smoother Roxy Music, more lush and commercial sounding. This is probably Roxy Music at their most lush, and it was a great hit. I actually do like both phases of Roxy, although I do acknowledge that Brian Ferry was a real groundbreaking artist. And if you want to know a little bit more about the early Roxy Music and those influences that made up the radical music in the early days, then I recommend this book. It's Becoming Roxy Music. It's called Remake, Remodel. It's written by Michael Bracewell, and it's all about those influences and the early days of Roxy Music, all that art school stuff. I'm going to mention another book later on as well, so this video has turned into almost a book review as well as 5 records. So the track I'm going to pick from this Roxy Music LP is very much in the mood, the sort of sepulchral mood of Avalon, very misty and sort of late nighty sound. And the track is a really short one called India, which is only 1 minute 45 seconds. Shows off Phil Manzanera's guitar playing. The reason why I picked this is partly nostalgic reasons. I did have the 7-inch single of More Than This, which is on this album. I think it's one of Roxy's best songs. And on the B-side was India, the instrumental track, which I picked for this first choice in 5 instrumentals. And we're going to go further back in time for this second choice. We're going to look at a Joe Meek production from 1961, and the track that I've picked is Night of the Vampire by the Moontrekkers. Released in 1961, the Moontrekkers in their early incarnation featured a 16-year-old Rod Stewart, so there's a peripheral connection there with Rod Stewart. Night of the Vampire was a very minor hit. I think it only got to about number 50 in the charts in 1951. But like all of Joe Meek's productions, it's chock full of interesting sounds. Joe Meek provides some tape trickery at the beginning of sounds a bit like, eerie wind, and he also apparently provided the scary screams at the end of this short track, Night of the Vampire. It features twangy guitar and also screechy clavioline keyboard. It's a Joe Meek classic, this one, Night of the Vampire, and I believe that the BBC banned this being played on the radio in 1961 because they felt it was unsuitable for people of a nervous disposition. So that's the second choice in the instrumentals, Night of the Vampire by the Moontrekkers from 1961. I'm going to come a bit more up to date with this next choice, Belbury Poly on the Ghost Box record record label. I've mentioned Ghostbox Records before because I think they're a very important British label. Began in about the mid-2000s by Julian House and Jim Jupp, and their music is mainly instrumental, very English, very evocative, very nostalgic. The track I've picked is Owls and Flowers, which is off the Owls map. This is an album from 2006, but this is a reissue from 2017, which I was pleased to get because the Ghostbox releases fetch ridiculous prices now, especially the early ones from the mid-2000s. Very, very expensive, very desirable. This is a great one, The Owl's Map by Belbury Poly. Some of the tracks on here are almost like, well, very much like lost TV themes from the 70s and 80s, all played on synthesizers. And although some of the tracks are very sort of jaunty, there is that feeling of foreboding and a spectral feel to going on in the background there. Someone who's written very, very, very well about the Ghostbox label, and particularly Belbury Poly, and another band which I mentioned earlier on in one of my earlier videos, the Advisory Circle, and that's Mark Fisher, the late Mark Fisher. This is a book I recommend, Ghosts of My Life, Writings on Depression, Hauntology and Lost Futures. Well, Mark Fisher writes in the chapter Nostalgia for Modernism, the focus group, and Belbury Poly in this one, and he writes very, very well. And if you read this, I think you'll probably want to buy all Ghostbox releases. And by the way, the Ghostbox online shop is now open again. You can buy their vinyl and CDs. And if you buy them directly from the label, they're actually quite cheap, you know, an album, and they're lovely, very well produced. You know, packages. The albums are only $14.95 if you buy them directly from the Ghostbox site. So moving backwards again in time, and this has a connection, of course, with Roxy music. I've picked an instrumental by Brian Eno from his 1975 album Another Green World. This is my original copy, which I treasure. Recently, Dean from Granny's Handbag over in Australia was talking about Eno and his pop Eno phase when he would sing, which he doesn't really do very much now. This album is a mixture of songs of pop Eno, but also some instrumentals. These instrumentals, a lot of them are very short, but they're just full of wonderful musical ideas. And the track I've picked, I could have picked lots of these early Eno albums, is Zawinul Lava. And I think it's a nod there to Joe Zawinul, who was a keyboard player who played with Miles Davis and also Weather Report. And it does have a sort of a jazz fusion-y feel, this track, Zawinul Lava. And it also features Phil Collins on drums, Percy Jones on bass, and Brian Eno plays grand piano, synthesizer, organ and tape. It's a very minimal piece, but beautiful. Fender Rhodes piano, reverbing away, lots of space, and then some very, very restrained drumming from Phil Collins. So that's off Another Green World by Brian Eno from 1975. And we come to our final choice, or my final choice on this thread of 5 instrumentals. And I've mentioned Jonathan Richman before and the Modern Lovers, and I showed recently their album Rock and Roll with the Modern Lovers from 1977, which contained the instrumental hit Egyptian Reggae, which was a hit in the British charts. I think it was maybe a hit in the US charts. They would never be as popular again, Jonathan Richman and the Modern Lovers. I decided to pick the live version, which I was listening to earlier on tonight, and it's a funny live album. Jonathan being very, very playful, especially on the song Ice Cream Man, which keeps on coming back and again for more encores until the audience are just probably completely fed up. But Egyptian Reggae is played very nicely on here on a kind of mock Egyptian reggae tune, which I'm sure you will have heard. So that's my final choice on this thread of 5 instrumentals. Thanks for watching. Hope you found that interesting. I found it interesting other people have responded to this. There's the phone. I better go. Bye for now.